Hi guys, welcome back. We've got a really interesting one this week. We've got the JTS dead centre takedown domed air rifle pellets to test. These are the 177s, and of the two that they do a heavy and a lighter one. These are the quoted 8.7 grainers. They're a quite unusual looking pellet, to be honest. Now these are made in China, possibly made by QYS maybe. I mean, new pellet companies don't just pop up overnight, so there's a good chance that they could be. Certainly they look like they could be made by QYS. If you look in the tin, the sort of makeup of the lead alloy looks very sort of QYS like. They're quite an expensive pellet. These are 15 quid a tin, so they're a premium price. Will they perform like a premium pellet? We'll find out shortly. We're going to start off just at the shorter distances. We're just under 25 yards here in the sheltered spot. We've got really good conditions for testing today, actually. Very little wind, just a gentle breeze sort of swirling around, so nothing really to affect the groups too dramatically. We're going to start off with the XTI 50. So this has a high spec lothar walther barrel in it. I've also got the airmaks katran with us, which has got a CZ barrel in it. And then tonight I'm going to take the Anschutz 9015 with its factory Anschutz barrel. I'm going to take that to the club. We're going to run that out 25 yards indoors, sort of bench rest style if you like. But we're going to start short, then we're going to push the ranges out because we've got some really good conditions. So let's get stuck in, shall we? Right, I just want to quickly explain the targets. I've just drawn these out. So the XTI and the Katran, well, everything I've got is zeroed up for JSB heavies, which, if you may or may not know, they're a 10.34 grain pellet, so quite a lot heavier than the quoted 8.7 grains of these JTSs. Now, ultimately, what we should expect is that the pellets will come in, and this is where we're going to be aiming, at the little red circle here, but we should actually expect the point of impact to be above that of the JSB heavies. So this is roughly where I'd expect it to be, all things being equal. I mean, they seldom are in the world of air rifles, but this is roughly where we'd expect our groups to land. This is where we're going to be aiming. The average group size that I expect to shoot with JSB heavies in conditions like today would be well under the size of that hole in that washer there. We're probably just over bench rest accurate with the JSB heavies in these conditions, something like a 7.5 to 8mm group, which I'm quite happy with, does everything I need it to. So that's sort of what we're expecting. As I've said, these are a premium pellet, they're not cheap, so we're going to weigh these up, we're going to size some up later on and actually measure them up and see whether or not they are a legitimate competition pellet. So right, GoPro is on. Everything's all set up, ready to go. So I gave the barrel a clean last night. I also chronoed this last night with the JSB heavies that I use all the time. It's running at 707 feet per second with heavies. Perfectly nice little safe area to be, so when it gets hot it doesn't go over. That's just about 11.5 foot-pounds. Seems to work pretty well, even at the longer ranges, sort of 100 yards, works perfectly well. I'd expect these, being slightly lighter at 8.7 grains, they should be running in the region of sort of 770, something like that. So let's see how they go. Just going to aim for the middle of the card for the moment. Just get a couple of shots off. Now, extensive testing. We've been using this on the channel for well over a year now. It doesn't take long to come on after a barrel clean. It's not particularly fussy at all, and it shoots the majority of half decent ammo pretty well. So, ooh. That one didn't feel particularly nice to load. It's quite normal after a barrel clean, new pellets, just for them to want. Oh, wow. Okay, that's quite tight in there. Right, that one's loaded beautifully. That one went in really smoothly. Right, that one, another was a bit graunchy going in. Right, now interestingly, all of those are largely on the same elevation line as the JSB heavies. Shot cycle feels distinctly jumpy as well actually with these. They don't feel like they're loading particularly nice to start with. Hopefully they will settle down. Now the sun's out behind us, we've got beautiful conditions today. As I've mentioned already, you can just see there the little feather on the wind indicator. There's barely a breath of wind to speak of. They're a really interesting looking pellet, these. They've got this sort of slightly elongated midsection. Quite what the reasoning behind that is anyone's guess at the moment, but certainly a little bit different. I don't think I've seen it like that on any other pellets before, so whether or not this is something that they've been trying and well, I think there's a bit of a variation in size of these, because some of these are loading quite nice and some of them really aren't. Right, well that's almost exactly now on the 0 for JSB heavies, which is a little bit peculiar. This has a fairly typical pellet probe arrangement, so the probe is shoving it up into the back of the barrel. When I use the 9015 tonight, we'll see immediately when I use that whether there's a variation in size, because I'll be thumbing them into the back of the barrel. And the seating depth and how much pressure it takes to actually get them into the barrel is immediately obvious, so that'd be interesting. They do appear to be moving around a little bit, which is not surprising if there is a variation in size. We'll weigh some up as well later on and see what sort of variation we get. Not the tightest groups. Let's go and have a little look at that. I think we definitely need to run this over the Chrono quickly. Right, well that's pretty much textbook pellets leading into a barrel. So the first ones we shot, you can see they're a little bit more scattered. They've progressively tightened up a little bit, but they didn't feel particularly nice loading into that barrel. The shot cycle was slightly abrupt, especially on the ones that are a bit tighter to load. So whether or not there's some blow-by, whether or not they're just not sealing particularly well in that barrel, I do not know. But what we'll do next, we'll get the katran on the go quickly. We'll shoot a couple of groups with that in multi-shot and single-shot format. Now that quite likes the harder pellets. It shoots particularly well actually with a QYS streamlined heavy, so we'll run a few groups off with that, and then I'm going to get the XTI over the Chrono, because a bit unusually these points of impact should have been up here somewhere, or at least we would have expected them to have been up there. So katran next, eh? Well, I've just loaded a couple of magazines up for the katran. We've got the single shot loader here as well, so we'll start on the mags, then we'll do a couple of groups with the single shot loader. Same sort of card as before. Again, we'd expect, this is zeroed up for JSB heavy, so we'd expect them to come in just above the actual point of aim on the target. Obviously the point of impact should be above that a little bit, but interestingly, loading the magazines up, a couple of these are actually quite tight going into the rotors of the magazine. Now, I've not seen that before. I wonder how large these are. I've got the measuring gauge at home, so when we get back we'll measure some of these up, but I don't think so far I've seen a pellet that's that tight in the rotor, so that's going to be interesting. Right, let's get this card shot, shall we? Right, katran then, let's have a little go. I haven't used this for a little while. Last time I used this was at the club. We were shooting silhouettes. Quite fun actually shooting silhouettes. This does pretty well, especially as it's so light. Right, well that's definitely feels a bit raunchy loading. Wait for the old red baron to go over. I know if they right down there. You can just feel that jumping out. You can feel it being pushed by the probe out of the magazine. You can feel it jumping over the transfer port section, and you can feel that last bit being seated into the back of the barrel. There's definitely something different size wise between these. There's some inconsistencies, I can be fairly sure. Now this has got a CZ barrel in it. This barrel is a little bit on the fussy side generally, but it shoots a lot of the heavier and harder pellets quite well. Been doing pretty well, especially with the QISs. And these look pretty good to start with. Now we've done some fairly involved testing in previous videos with this. The magazines and the single shot loaders, there's not really an appreciable difference in accuracy between the two of them. But they don't seem to be cycling through that magazine particularly smoothly. Wow, I wonder if that's one of them really tight ones. Look, that's dropped to full mil dot. That's weird. Strangely, both rifles feel a little bit snappy on firing. See, that one's gone in absolutely beautifully. Yeah. Right, let's go and have a quick look at that. Full magazine through that. We'll swap onto the single shot loader next. Right, well that's not too bad a start. Just over an inch, that's a full magazine, so 18 shots. Got one went high, one dropped low, but the weird thing is that all of these, The point of impact should be up here somewhere. I think what we'll do next is swap over to the single shot loader to see if we get an actual marked point of impact shift, because again I expect them to be up here somewhere. But certainly not too bad to start with. They'll probably settle down quite well. They do not feel nice loading into that barrel, and the shot cycle, as I've said, is a little bit abrupt, so I don't know whether or not they're getting damaged on loading. I think what we'll do is grab a spare barrel when we get home and we'll rod a couple through, and we'll couple that with measuring a few up and see whether or not they're getting damaged, whether there's some blow by or whether they're just not getting expanded in the barrel particularly well. So let's get cracked on then, eh? So picking through the actual tin here, they do look pretty clean. They look fairly uniform in terms of manufacture. There's no damaged skirts or any crud in the bottom of the tin that I can see. Interestingly, they came with a bit of foam in the bottom, so underneath the pellets there's foam. There was black foam on top of that, and inside of the lid there's a little papery type of material in there as well, so quite well packed into that tin, which is a good sign. But then they should be for 15 quid a tin. Well, that's pretty encouraging. Perfectly through the same hole. Now that's interesting. That's a big difference between the magazine and the single shot loader. In fact, I've done a couple of videos before on the actual comparison between the two of those. Oh, that was moved slightly, but still not too bad. Interesting thing is that both of them groups, through the magazine and the single shot loader, are broadly the same shape. There's no real wind to speak of. Oh. Okay, so they've ended up broadly the same. Now the strange thing is why are they still below the point of aim? Don't know, right, we better get the Chrono out. Let's get the XTR back out and Chrono him up. Well, by the time we finish running them groups off, definitely marginally smaller through the single shot loader, but really no appreciable difference. We've still got these ones that have quite clearly dropped a little bit low, one up here, so there's something going wrong there. Don't know, hopefully the Chrono will answer some of the questions, I think. Right, quick camera swap. The old DJI would not film the phone screen, it was all rolling and horrible. Into the backboard. What did we get there? Hang on. 741. Weird. 739. Let's just get one more off. That would certainly be very telling as why the point of impacts are dropping a lot lower than I anticipated. 741, 743, 739. So we've got 4 feet per second spread. Is that right? Yeah. That's pretty good. So the XTI is incredibly consistent. I only chronoed it yesterday actually when I was at the club. So this was running at 707 feet per second with JSB heavies. I would have expected these at this sort of weight to be running and probably 770. So they're about 30 feet per second down on where I'd expect them. And that would certainly, yeah, I mean, that would certainly explain why they're dropping that bit lower. So I think what we need to do now then is to run them out into the fields. Quite why they're running that bit slower is anyone's guess at the moment. I think how tight they are to load, I would bet that they're getting damaged going in, so we're either getting some blow by past them. Not sure, we'll check that when we get home. We can test that. We can rod some through a barrel. We can also measure them up as well. But I think we'll go and find a spot, maybe 45, 50 yards, and see what they drift like in a little bit of a breeze. Right, with the magic of editing, I'm going to put the shot string back up there again. I think I just need to explain really what's going on with this. So the problem we've got working within a power limit within the UK, now the rifle itself with JSB heavies will basically be making just over 11.5 foot-pounds, which is just a nice safe place to be. When it gets hot in the middle of the summer, when the temperatures really get up, it will creep up a little bit but still stay legal. You know, JSB heavies for the majority of sub 12, obviously in 177 like PCP rifles, they are one of the most efficient pellets, so they make pretty much the most power. Of course they're quite heavy, they run a bit slower, but in terms of the maximum power they make generate, you're pretty safe. Sort of 707 to 710 feet per second is the maximum I'd like to run them at. The problem we've got now with these is that they're running at 740 feet per second for only 10.67 foot-pounds. I can't now just turn this up to get it up to 11 and a bit, because if I do that, The minute we then swap back over to JSB heavies, it's going to be way over. So we're going to have to run them at that. I can't really do anything with that to bump them up. Of course, if you're working without or no power limit, then you can probably crank them up a little bit more. However, the fact that they're probably in the region of 30 feet per second down on where I'd expect them to be, I reckon at the moment it's going to be a weight or a size issue more than anything else. So we're going to push the ranges out now and see what they sort of drift like in the wind. The wind's picked up a little bit. It's going to be perfect conditions for real world comp testing. So let's go and do it now. Okay, moving everything around. We're out of 50 yards now. So this is the target, similar to what we used at the closer ranges. We've got a couple of extra little circles on there. Once we get a handle on these, we'll see if we can actually pick off a few of these targets here. But what I'm going to do is actually adjust it to the same drop that I would do with the JSB heavies. So I'm going to give it an adjustment of 20 clicks in its elevation, and we're going to be aiming directly here now at the 25 yard mark. They were already dropping as much as the 10.34 grain heavies. We'll see if they're dropping any more now on account of the much slower speeds they're running at than I'd really like and the lower power. It's only now obvious to realise that they're going to be probably dropping a little bit more at 50 yards. However, what the most important thing is how consistent they are in the wind, whether or not they're easy enough to judge, whether or not you'll actually be able to hit a target with them. So let's get everything out there, shall we? Oh, what beautiful conditions to be out in. I don't think we're going to get many more nice days this year. We've got a gentle breeze running. Right, I'm just going to give it 20 clicks. That's actually the amount of clicks that I would give it using JSB heavies at 55 yards, which is 50 metres. We're just inside of that, we're at 50 yards. Let's see what happens, shall we? Also, I just had a phone call from Samantha. My new scopes arrived, so I'm going to probably be swapping this arken off of here shortly. It's going to go on to something else. I've got a new falcon arrived. Right, I'm aiming dead at the circle, the very centre of the card. And of course it's way up top. Let's go the other way, shall we? Wow. So broadly speaking, we're on the right sort of elevation line. That wind had picked up a tiny bit, but there is only the most noticeable breath of wind at the moment. So at the moment I'm not making any corrections for the wind, I'm not making any allowances at all. Why is that one there? That's done exactly the same as them closer groups when we got one that came in a bit high. Haven't had any that have dropped super low yet. Oh, now the geese are turning up. Quickly get a shot off before they come through. Wow, and them two have stamped straight on top of each other. They had babies this spring. Another 5 goslings. You can't really tell the difference, they're just a bit smaller, a little bit poofy still. Super angry though. Right, come on, hurry up, will ya? You don't need guard dogs up here when you've got a flock of geese. Angry buggers they are. And that. Why is that over there? I saw the feather move just a tiny bit, a little gentle flick of a breeze. Wind's coming a little bit towards us now. It should push the pellets down a little bit. Wow. These are pretty hard to judge where they're going. These are definitely not a match pellet in this rifle, that's for sure. Just these really microscopic changes in wind direction are really pushing these around. We'll rod a couple through the barrel, I bet you any money they've got really heavily indented rifling grooves in them. I think that was more luck than judgment. We managed to stamp one on there. Most of these, luckily for the moment, felt pretty good loading. So in calm conditions, they're not too bad. When there's barely a breath of wind, they fly fairly true, but they definitely seem pretty skittish in the wind. I mean, you couldn't ask for better conditions than we've got today for testing. Right, let's see if I can pick off that top left circle. What on earth are you doing all the way up there? Oh, pretty close. I don't think I'd feel confident trying to use these in competition. Look at that, look, barely a breath of wind at all. Yeah, let's get a couple shot with the katran. That shot fairly well with them, but they certainly in this are not a good barrel match. There's definitely something going on either with the sizing or the weight of those. The fact they're running as slow as they are, they're dropping pretty well. Now, I don't know whether or not that little elongated section in the middle of the pellet is actually impeding their performance downrange, whether there's more drag on them or something along those lines. I don't know. We do know a few people though that could tell us, so maybe we shall do a bit of further investigation, but I definitely don't think we're going to be using these going forward. They also do a heavier version of these. Now, at the moment, I don't really even want to try these anymore. If you want me to get the heavier versions, let us know and we'll give them a try as well. I think it's probably only fair that we try both types, but certainly in this, the shot cycle feels terrible. We're going to get home, we're going to investigate quite what's going on with those, because there's something unusual with that. I haven't quite put my finger on it yet, but we'll find out in a mo. Right then, let's have a little go with the katran. No dialing, just a bit of holdover with this beast. Let's just see how long it takes before we can actually hit the target, eh? What do you reckon then? About 1.5 mil of holdover? No, it's got to be more because they're already way down. Just to stay safe, we'll just give it 1 mil of holdover to start with. For that second shot, I gave it what ought to have been the correct amount of holdover. It did what the last ones did, drop way low. So that was nearly 3 mil of holdover then from my 25. Well, don't forget 25, it was already about half down, so about 2.5 mil of drop from a 25 yard zero. Oh, nearly. There's basically no wind whatsoever at the moment. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little tiny bit of fluff on that little bit of twig just to the left of us, and that's barely even moving. They're not bad when there's no wind, but the moment that wind starts moving, they become very, very unstable. Why is it over there? Now, we've done enough videos in the past. You've seen me shooting in the wind a lot, even out at the silly long ranges. I've got a fairly good eye for shooting in the wind. I've spent most of my adult life doing it. But these just feel very, very unpredictable. We've got pretty big spreads. I think we're pissing in the wind, really trying to actually hit a target. So at this point I'm holding over 2.5 mil dots, and I'm actually aiming off to the left about 3/4 of a dot, and there's barely the most discernible breeze running at all. See, at the moment I can't feel a single bit of wind. I don't think I could use those for pest control, not humanely, not through either of these. Right, let's get these home, let's go and have a look. Hopefully we've got enough left in here now to find what's different about these, what's unusual. But not too bad if there's not a lot of wind. However, they drop a lot, they're running quite slow. But they feel very, very unpredictable in the wind. So, don't know, let's go and find out. Let's see if we can work out what's going on, eh? Right then, we're back. That was pretty disappointing. We should have saved ourselves some time really, and we should have weighed these and measured them up first. It would have been quite telling, and it is. Measuring them up, they've got quite a broad size on the head sizes actually. They've got quite a big spread, some of the worst spreads that I've seen, especially for a pellet that's anywhere near this price. In fact, the budget, the cheapest H&Ns, their entry level ones, the Excite, the Econs are way, way tighter in terms of the sizing. They are consistent in weight though, which is peculiar. We've only got a 0.14 grain spread, the lightest being 8.76 up to 8.9, so they're all coming in slightly overweight. But the sizing of these, most of these come up really big, so 4.55 and slightly larger, so that's quite interesting. This is the barrel out of the 9015, the CZ barrel. A couple of these, I've just picked through that lot. I've got 3 that are massive. You can just get that into the back of there.
it's really quite tight. It's quite hard to sort of seat it right into the back of the barrel itself. Let's see if we can rod that through. We'll probably need to get some photos on the phone of that. But we can see there that we've got some quite heavy cut-in rifling grooves in there. It's not surprising that they're becoming unstable downrange. A couple of these are even tighter still, although you can't really tell the difference on the measuring gauge there. You can certainly feel the difference when you're loading them in. See that one there, look, really tight. Now the thing with a lot of these, that head is just wedged in there, but you can see at the moment the skirt's sitting slightly squiffy. It takes a hell of a lot of force to actually push that in there and seat that into the rifling properly. So this is one of the reasons why they're running that bit slower. It's either going to be a combination of the additional friction of that actually getting it through the barrel itself, or the fact that because they're as hard as they are and they're as tight as they are, they're not getting a decent seal. When it gets 80 to 100 bar up, it's chuff. So certainly no surprise that the results are a little bit sketchy. I mean, most things at 25 yards, as long as there's no huge disfigured bits, any damage on the heads, which there isn't, these do look, when you pick through them, they look like a reasonably good quality pellet. XTI at 25 yards, we've got a reasonable group there, but of course when you push the ranges out, that's when you really start to see the differences between them. Now the conditions for testing today were some of the best we've had this year actually, and they were becoming very, very twitchy in the wind. I mean, all the way over here, this is just ridiculous. The wind movements were sort of 1 mile an hour changes, really very delicate. You've seen me shooting out in much, much stronger winds. When we used them Brazilian pellets, for instance, they were fantastic in the wind, very easy to judge, very easy to get a handle on and then make allowances, obviously to hit your target, which is ultimately the aim of the game, but these just don't really do it for me, unfortunately. If you want me to get the heavy versions of these, I will give them a try, but I don't think I'm going to do an awful lot more with these. They're a little bit disappointing. As I mentioned, are they a QIS made pellet? Possibly. If you look in the tins, the makeup or the lead alloys look very similar. I mean, I'm not entirely convinced. However, if these happen to be a bad batch, what are we going to do? Do we go, right, we'll just grab another tin? There's no obvious batch codes on these at all, unless there's something hidden in the writing on the back there. There's nothing obvious that denotes a batch code. Even on your H&Ns and your JSBs, everyone else's, the QISs, we've got proper batch codes. So if you find a bad batch, you can avoid them, or if subsequently you find a really good batch, you can buy more, but there's nothing obvious on there, so we can avoid that particular batch in the future. Or whether we can even go, right, well, we want to try a different one, we're going to find some better ones. I don't know. So yeah, a little bit disappointed really with these. 15 quid a tin, they are not a premium pellet, or certainly this tin isn't. The build tolerances are not bad weight wise, size wise they're all over the place, get unstable downrange and all over the place in the wind. So yeah, I'm not going to do too much more with these. However, I have just had something else arrive, so I'm going to quickly show you that. Oh, check this beast out, Endura S40i. So this is the new one. Been waiting for this for ages. Quick wiggle around the garden, looks really, really cool. This is probably going to end up being the replacement for the EP5 on the XTI 50. The XTI is going to go under the knife soon. It's going to have some major surgery, new chassis, new scope, a bit of a revamp really, going to turn that into much more of an all-rounder. But yeah, quick wiggle so far with this, looks really quite cool. Glass looks phenomenal, especially at the price point. So maybe the next week or two, once I spent a bit of time with it, we'll do a video on that as well. But that'll do it for this one, guys. I will catch you in the next one.